I'm going to kick it over to the co-build team, and they can go ahead and present and introduce themselves.
Thanks so much, Peter. Yeah, as you said, we're from Co-Build Construction. We're excited to be here with y'all. We're going to talk about lean light, which some people get uncomfortable when they hear the word lean light. But what we're going to talk specifically is because we do small projects, right-size lean practices for small projects. And the big part of our presentation today is the surprising role of neuroscience when it comes to applying lean to construction and lean to our lives. Our presenters today will be Jordan, James, Scott, and Stephanie. Will introduce ourselves in just a minute. A couple of things. We're going to make sure that we're checking all the marks with y'all. We have some identifying factors. This is what we're hoping that you're going to learn today. We're going to identify some factors that influence the need for small projects, tenant improvements to apply lean differently. Name several options for batching lean practices when projects have little financial margin. I know you guys probably have huge margins on your jobs, so sometimes they're smaller. Explain how the work of Dan Siegel and Steve Porges applies to construction, and describe why field leadership needs to be in the zone to execute lean.
Yeah, so this was years ago, and I was walking onto a job site. It's about 6 a.m. I was new to commercial construction. I, had just moved from Denver to California, and with my whole family, 3 kids, and I'm walking onto this job site with one of the owners and founders of CoBuild, and this was kind of a normal practice. This Tuesday morning, this largest project I'd run to that point is about $6 million and about 20,000 square feet. And the Ed would show up with me on that Tuesday mornings, and he would walk through. And it was kind of like some training. He was pointing out some things, trying to make sure I didn't miss anything, trying to make sure everything got caught, everything got built properly. And I don't know what it was that particular morning, if it was me, if it was him, like his line of questioning. But it was just the way he was asking the questions that just set me off. And, it just, something in me broke, I have to say. And I think, if you've been in construction for any amount of time, you kind of understand that moment of stress when you're trying to meet budgets and deadlines, and you just break. And, I kind of held it together while he was there. And after Ed left, like my hard hat came slamming down to the ground. Tears were starting to fill my eyes, and I'm around a bunch of construction guys. And so I gathered up all my stuff, I threw it in my bag, walked off the job site. And at the time, CoBuild was still a pretty young company. And so everything that we did was cradle to grave. So I was the estimator, I was the project manager, I was the superintendent, I was my own project engineer, and I closed out all the jobs that I ran. And so got in my car, I'm heading to my next project. And at the height of how busy we were, there were days that I was driving somewhere around, I don't know, in between 150 and 200 miles a day. Had anywhere from 6 to 10 different projects that I was running of different sizes, and got in the car, started driving to my next job. And on the highway in rush hour traffic, and it just hits me. The whole world just started going dark, and I couldn't see. My chest got really heavy. My breathing got really shallow, and I was pretty sure that I was about to die, whether it was from a car wreck or a heart attack. So pulled the car over, called my wife, and sat there for a little bit, just trying to breathe. Eventually recovered, but got back on the highway, went and hit my jobs, made it back to the office later that afternoon, walked in, sat down, opened my computer, and Ed came out of his office and looked at me and said, "Hey, I think we need to chat." And it was like that moment where I was like, oh, I've been here before. Like I know how this conversation's about to go. I'm about to get fired. Um, so I went in the room and I sat down, and instead of like everything I expected was shame, guilt, um, instead, kind of what I received from Ed, and Steph was there too, um, was understanding, was grace, was a whole lot of mismatching experience for me in the moment. And I think it was that moment for myself, I think for Ed and Stephanie who started CoBuild, and for our company where we really started our journey towards lean construction. Because what we understood was that construction is stressful, it's really hard. And if we're going to do this without constantly burning people out, we need to figure out a different way to run the company and to operate our business and to run these projects so that we can actually preserve the lives of the people that are in this industry. Um, and so today you're going to hear a whole lot about lean. You're also going to hear some science about how we at CoBuild support that. And so I'll hand it over to Stephanie.
Yeah, so ironically, the mission of CoBuild is to create environments for people to succeed. And what we had discovered is that we were way outside of our integrity if one of our best project managers was on the verge of burnout because of how hard we pushed. And the reality is construction is really stressful. The data bear that out constantly. But we had to acknowledge that actually the tenant improvement type of construction that we did was particularly it had a particularly high cost for people. So we had to acknowledge the reality of this is where we were. And then the reality is that we had little time for design. Many of our projects were VC funded and it was a race to get to market. So our clients were often pushing us to get the product to the end of So we still do a lot of design build or progressive design build. The schedules, because of the nature of our tenant improvement small projects, were also compressed. So there's little margin for error. And because of the way that we would bid these projects, and we were working a lot with VC firms, there was less supervision hours built into the bid process because the budgets were tight. And alongside that, the trade partners that we brought on just had very little experience with lean construction. I think that is common around the country, and certainly in the Bay Area, that a lot of our trades just aren't familiar with how to run a lean project. And those were the types of folks that we were working with. They were good partners, but uninitiated in lean practices. So that was our reality. It was a marathon of sprints and little room for error, and it was putting tremendous pressure on all of our systems and particularly all of our people. So we started looking at, well, what does lean have to offer to us that could help us live out with authenticity the reality of, like, if we're committed to creating environments for people to succeed, then we had to adopt other practices. And that was the beginning of lean for us, where we could embrace a philosophy and adapt the methods and deal with the reality that we're dealing with. So I'm Stephanie Wood. I'm the CEO of CoBuild, and I was there in the room when we had that conversation with Scott. In fact, we did not fire him. He is the VP of construction. So that's who you met just a minute ago. So Scott, I'll let you. I guess you already introduced yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm Scott. I'm the VP of Construction for CoBuild. Have been here almost since the beginning. They did not, in fact, fire me, and it's been actually an honor to kind of be a part of the journey with CoBuild and with Ed and Stephanie Wood, and to get to a place now where we've got a team of people that are implementing lean on our projects and within our team, and also building in systems that actually save people from burnout.
Yeah, so I'm Jordan. I'm the general superintendent for co-build. My story is similar to Scott. Like I kind of saw what Steph and Ed were doing. Actually, just Ed. It's funny. A lot of people say LinkedIn's going away. LinkedIn got me to this company. I knew of Ed and what he was doing, and kind of was always a fan from afar. But I was at a kind of a company I thought would be a lifelong journey for me. Family history there, just long history with the team, and just would sit on LinkedIn and kind of see what Ed would post and kind of give it a lot of likes. And so that led to a lot of coffee and just talking about the industry and how to make the industry better for people. We both had this vision of just people need a place to succeed, right, and to work in a healthy environment. And that led me to co-build, where I then got to meet Scott and Steph. And yeah, just happy with the vision we have here and excited to share that with you guys today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jordan. James Gable, I'm the director of construction operations. I've been here a little less than, or maybe a little more than half a year. I did leave a $1 billion general contracting company to come here for the stuff that we are talking about today. Very unique how co-build approaches its respect for people, and that was the big draw for me. Besides, they're a bunch of great people, and that's why I am here at co-build.
Okay, so out of this basically existential crisis of we said we were trying to create environments for people to succeed, and yet we were burning folks out, we philosophy towards construction emerged, which we call Builder 360. And it's an approach to construction that puts things into place where we make sure that our trade partners are being successful and that we're valuing the work experience and life experience of our employees. We're also taking into consideration what our clients need and the construction managers and even the design team. So the success, it's the sort of philosophy that rising tide raises all ships. So we doubled down on believing that that was a possibility in construction. So that's where you get the 360, success in every direction. The builder part is an acronym. Each of those letters stand for a part of the paradigm that we've implemented. We will not be able to go through all of that, but we thought we'd tackle these first two letters. So the first one is building grit and resilience, and the second is leveraging lean. And because you came here to learn a little bit about lean, we're going to start with L and not with B, and give you a few case studies of how we've applied lean to our small projects tenant improvement philosophy. So we have, though lean is often applied on different types of project, we found a way to adapt lean to work in tenant improvement small projects. We feel like the philosophy of lean can be applied in any build. The three pillars, if you're not familiar with lean, are to respect people, eliminate waste, and to strive for continuous improvement. And we've adapted the methods of lean to be able to do those three things.
We can go to the next slide. All right, so we're gonna get in the nitty gritty here and kind of talk about how we've done this on job sites. So I don't know, is anybody here familiar with lean itself or has run jobs that use lean? Is any, guess a lot of people are mute. Feel free to unmute. I don't mind talking to people. I enjoy it. But if you guys are or not, right?
Yes.
So lean came from Japan, right? It came from the Toyota production system, and there was a lot of these methodologies that Toyota had, right? And they were really good, and they worked really well in a set place, right, inside their factories. You know, there was a lot of systems they had to make sure they were constantly improving their flow of production, eliminating that waste, right? You know, Gembos. We have all these things that we've learned from Japan, and construction then took it and made a really cool program with lean. Uh, so when we first started looking at lean, you know, going to some of the bigger companies that were doing lean, I'm like, man, here's all these cool things you guys are doing. And, you know, I'm hearing all these resources. They have full-time supers on jobs, and they have, they have, PEs and all these things happening so they can make lean look really amazing. And we're like, we really like this thing called lean, but this isn't really working on small projects. And as we started doing some research, we realized, wait a minute, not a lot of people are doing these on small projects. And the reason why it came down to a few things. Um, the big one was budget, right? Lean is definitely usually talked about for larger projects, have a full-time staff there from the general contractor, maybe the design team, right? Some of the jobs like IPD, it's in the contract to do it these ways. But we're looking at this like we want these things for our people. We want to respect our people. We want to see better flow. We want to see less waste. We want to see these things happen. So how do we do this on small projects? So here's kind of the example we did. And just to give you some ideas of what this is these were repeat projects, industrial projects. So they were, we had a developer out here that did a lot of short-term leases for just, quick, 2 to 5 year leases, right? So they would get people in and out of their buildings quite a bit. People would come out, they'd want to white box these things, get them back in shape, do some design for the new tenant, get it back. So very fast projects. They were the same client. They owned about 17 million square feet in the Bay Area. So they had a lot of these going on. And the scopes are identical. They knew what they wanted to do. Unfortunately, those things we had going against us was the trades we were using for these, right? The trades we were using for these size projects didn't know lean at all. The schedules were incredibly short. And when I say these were small projects, these were projects that were maybe 90,000 to 150 to maybe sometimes 500,000. They weren't big projects, but they were just the same thing, just bigger sizes, right? A 90,000 to a 150 was just two of the same things side by side with the hole in the wall, right? For a bigger company.
And we were doing
design
like
budget.
10 of these at a time, right? Like
Yes,
six, 7, 10.
We would do like 6, 7 of these like a month, right? So profit only came from volume and efficiency. So we're like, how do we apply lean to this? We can't have a full-time super there because the developer, that's not part of their budget. We can't have these huddles that they talk about in lean. We can't, have some of these tools we have. So we're like, what's the most important thing here? Well, the most important thing here is consistency, profitability, and making sure the trades understand flow and respect it. So we're like, wait a minute, how do we change this for a small project? So we actually gathered all our teams and we made a commitment. We said, we're going to only use the same trade partner for these projects. So we brought all those trade partners to a Mexican restaurant and had an in-person pool plan session, right? Not the normal ones you would see with the sticky notes, and hours of work. This was very simple. We rented out a room at a restaurant, closed that curtain, got our food, and started going to work. We started talking about how does this schedule look? This client is doing these projects in 6 or 7 weeks. What can we really do if we're doing these in a flow state where we know what we want to happen? And we started working, and as we're working, we're like, guys, are we really going to say this out loud? And sure enough, we got the schedule to 3 weeks. And we're thinking, there's no way. We're not going to be busting out, $100,000 projects every, in 3 weeks. But it did. Why? Because we had commitment from the teams. They had buy-in. We built trust, and we presented that schedule to the client. He kind of looked at me like, man, he's like, I'm going to still tell my team 6 weeks, but if you do this, like, I'm going to be a hero. And it started working. We started doing simple things. So we couldn't have a super there doing a daily huddle, but we used visual boards. We had a lot of lean boards up there that showed schedule, that showed site plans, that showed like when a trade partner walked in, they knew, hey, this is my plan for today. This is what I have to get done in the next 2 days. And as that super was traveling job to job, he can kind of communicate with them. And we started seeing this lean practice happen now in these small TI projects. All of a sudden, all these small projects started working as one big project. If you guys know the word tact, right? We were kind of doing a tact cadence. We would start some of them a couple days apart. So we would run them just like a tact plan, like you might see in a multi-home development or on a large project, multiple floor. But it was amazing to see like, hey, we can take these principles and do them in a really small project. And here's some of the results we have. If you want to go to the next slide. So we found that, again, previous contractors and the current ones were delivering in 5 to 6 weeks. We were delivering in 3 constantly. We actually did one in 2 weeks in 3 days. We found out it was a training ground for our engineers, our more basic trade partners to learn about lean and get excited about it and then use that on our larger projects. And it cultivated a relationship of trust, which led to some incredibly large project with this client. They don't just do these small ones. They have some large ones that we're actually finishing one right now. It's roughly 306,000 square feet of industrial space we're doing for a client of theirs. And that project happened because they saw, man, these guys have trust. And when we then came to the large project and they saw our lean principles in a full size, it was like, this is amazing. And so I think it was a commitment to knowing that lean is more than just a bunch of check boxes. It's a philosophy and willingness to adapt these methods to make sure people are respected, job flows good, and that 360, empowerment of the team. So it was a great project, and I think it just shows that lean can be used anywhere, in this country for projects. So I'll hop back over to the next case study.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jordan. One important really thing we learned from doing those kind of those training grounds is we were able to apply that and then some other steps to a larger project. It was a progressive design build that we were doing. And one thing that's really, really important is when you're applying lean, you can't throw the whole baby into the bathwater. I don't know. I don't think that's the right scenario, but you can't do it all at once. You've got to do it incrementally. And going through those repetitions in the small project allowed us to go directly into a larger design build project that we had. Again, progressive design build, undisclosed client. I don't know. Do you guys work for those people? They drive the black SUVs and their faces are whited out. We don't know who they are, right? Undisclosed client, undisclosed amount of money on an undisclosed project. But one thing that we were working with, this was emerging technology. And when you're working with that within, and this is the realm that we love working in, they're still trying to figure it out. So the scope was consistently and constantly changing, and we had to react with that. And when you're a general contractor, it's not just you, right? It's all of your trade partners as well. We're all trying to respond to what they're trying to figure out as they go. Now, this particular site had multiple general contractors on site, which has its own complications. And we were not the lead. There actually was not necessarily a lead general contractor on this site. But one thing that we feel like we do really well now, and we learned to do on this project, was figuring out what conditions of satisfaction are. This is really important in lean construction, in knowing what does the owner want, because we're trying to clarify. It seemed to be changing. And when you have clarity with your owners and with your clients, and on exactly what their expectations are, it makes that build so much better. And then the other thing is VUCA. I don't know if you're all familiar with that acronym. It's impossible to eliminate in these scenarios. It's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. We heard a lot of those words during the COVID time period and when we were doing a lot of those venture capital projects that Steph had referenced, but you can't eliminate it. It doesn't go away. Almost all of our projects are always in that realm, right? They're not crystal clear. So working with all of those things, we started to do a few things that we found that worked in those smaller projects. Visual communications. When we do that, just like Jordan mentioned, the teams know what to expect. They can see it when you're not there. Having your constraints identified early. So we were doing this now on a larger scale and finding the same results, almost even better, because you have a bigger impact that's more narrow with your teams. Daily huddles is probably one of the most important things that we do. Isn't that right, Jordan? Making sure that we are communicating with our teams on a daily basis, because things change. You know, sometimes a trade, something happens. They get in car wrecks, things come up. You're able to identify that in a daily huddle. That's one of our core values, our basics that we do as an organization. It's really just a basic lean. It's a lean thing to do. And then also, you know, this was not like your typical IPD big, you know, gigantic project room. So we were able to create a space though that allowed our teams to collaborate in the morning and have a space. You need to create those space that's in there. And then the other thing is, as I mentioned, the VUCA part, this project had to pause. Like we got to a point and they're like, whoa, wait a minute, we're going to figure it out. And when you do this, it can be really frustrating for trades. And if you don't have good relationships with them, then that's where really the issue comes in. So this is really complex project, progressive design build, all of this going on. But here's some wins that we had, and we wanted to share them with you. One is we got recognized by our client as the go-to GC because we were organized, because we communicated well, we communicated with our trades. A lot of the other trades of the other GCs were frustrated, but we were in this complex environment thriving because of the lean practices that we had put into place. We had also built a strong team based on our trade partners, and these are relational. As we're having these huddles, as we're having these discussions with our trade partners, we are definitely creating a stronger team because that's what it takes for us to get it done. And then the big thing was this was the proof of concept. You know, as Jordan was out there working initially with these concepts in repetition, we found it's a proof of concept, and these work on all types of projects. And in fact, this has led to some future negotiated work with us as well too. So when you leverage lean, these type of wins work not only in the small projects, but in the medium-sized projects and they're successful in the large projects. It's just in all on how you approach it. Just another case study that we wanted to share with you guys.
Yeah, I think from a business standpoint, we can think lean is a great philosophy, but I want to highlight the fact that in both of those case studies, practicing lean and respect for people actually had this impact of really positive bottom line impact, because we ended up negotiating good big projects after proof of concept for the client, that they saw that our commitment to lean and respect for people actually delivered better results and better margins for both them and for us. Okay, so we talked a little bit about lean and how lean can be implemented on tenant improvement or small projects, but there's this foundational other piece that I think isn't part of the conversation around lean, but is probably one of the most overlooked aspects of lean, and that's building grit and resilience.
Yeah, I think to kind of piggyback on that, lean is a great practice and great principles, great philosophy, and implementing that. And you can kind of see from our case studies that it does help a team be successful, even in the most complex environments. But as we all know, at the end of the day, commercial construction is still incredibly stressful. We still have deadlines that we have to meet. We still have budgets that we have to meet, and we have clients that expect and demand that the budgets and schedules don't change. And if anything, we need to save money and still deliver faster. And so the stress, the compounding stress of just the environment that is commercial construction led us kind of down a path to say, we can implement these lean practices, and those are really good, and they can help us build better. But what do we do with the stress that still comes with it? Because even your best people, like Steph said earlier, if our best project managers are burning out, then it doesn't matter how well we are implementing lean. If we're burning those people out and they can't continue to implement it well beyond themselves and to the teams that they're working with, superintendents and trade partners, and up to the client. So we said we've got to do something a little bit different. And so that's where we came up with the B that's a part of the Builder 360, which is the build, grit, and resiliency. Because in an industry like commercial construction, where the expectation is that you're tough, and sort of the American spirit behind it of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, isn't always totally realistic. And so, we had to end up developing a method to keep our people from burning out. And so we came up with the B, which is to build the grit, build the resilience. And so it comes on, what is grit and how is it different than just being tough? And so have a couple of definitions here for the team that you can read here on the screen. But grit is basically your ability to solve problems, stay grounded, curious, connected under significant stress. Here at CoBuild, we call it staying in the zone. We call people out when they're not in the zone. Kind of the other areas that you might find yourself in if you're not in the zone is what we call the storm or the swamp. And so when you're in the storm or you're in the swamp, your grit is your ability to stay in the zone. Your resilience is to get back into the zone. And so resilience is that capacity that you have when you're in the storm or you're in the swamp to be able to pull yourself back into the zone, so that you are staying curious, you're staying relational, kind of some of the stuff that you're going to hear from Stephanie a little bit is the neuroscience behind this, which is when you're in the zone, you're actually able to use the part of your brain that helps you make better decisions in the moment when you're under an immense amount of stress. And so what we found here at CoBuild is that lean actually requires leaders to be in the zone. Because when you're in the zone, you're thinking more clearly, you're asking more curious questions, you're actually able to stay relational with the people that you're building with. Because as we all know, in the heat of the moment, when your mechanical team backs their lift into that brand new wall that you just built, it's a whole lot easier to just flip off the chain and go ballistic and start blaming people, especially when you find that hole is in the wall and nobody told you about it. And so, building grit and resilience is all about being in the zone, staying curious, staying relational, and those kind of things actually help you have empathy for the team that's around you. You're able to solve problems at a much quicker rate and with much more a higher level of just curiosity, higher level of understanding, and being able to understand what is it that the trades need, what is it that the client needs, and being able to solve those problems faster.
Scott, that example sounded very, very specific.
It's never happened to me.
Like maybe you've had some personal experience with that.
Yes,
I
very
do.
much so.
Okay, so we talked about lean having lean. The three pillars of lean are respect for people, eliminating waste, continuous improvement. Also, we acknowledge the reality. We've embraced the philosophy. We've adapted the methods, but we've never talked about the foundation. And I think the foundation is something that doesn't get talked about enough. And this is actually who is building this. The people are actually the builders, right? So do we have leaders who can withstand the pressure and make good decisions? That's really what grit and resilience is about, is what do we do to equip leaders? And we say even field level guys are leaders. Everyone's responsible for influencing other people. So the what we're up against is legacy construction, where the ethos is tough people, and they are strong. Construction folks are strong. The problem is they're so strong that under enough stress, they don't just bend, they break. And they shatter, that we see full burnout. And if you've been in construction a while, I'm sure you've seen it. Unfortunately, it's kind of devastating to watch. People are suffering silently. They pay with heart disease, high blood pressure, insulin resistance. They take that stress home to their kids and their partners. And we see families pay the cost of the stress that construction folks are bearing at work. And then construction happens to be really high levels of addiction. So we're saying tough is not going to take us forward. Lean actually needs something else. We need resilience. And resilience is actually intentional practices. It's about building habits, about having rhythms of work and rest, which is not typically celebrated in construction. We see like heroes made of workaholics. And that isn't actually a recipe for success.
So I'm going to give some personal stories here too and kind of talk about what this means, right? And there's a reason why we talk about this grit and resiliency when it comes to TI projects. As James said, myself, I've had a chance to work on a large project. Having an offsite office half a mile away to go somewhere and having a full team, right? Having supers working underneath me, having, full-time carpenters that are just there just to, if you point to go do something, having full-time laborers to make sure the job site's clean. I've been on those. And that's great. But in TI, we don't have that. And kind of the story I point to a lot is, when I drive around my neighborhood, right? I live in a neighborhood that was built in the late 50s. So it's a roof time, right? We are in roof season, peak roof season in our neighborhood. It's, they're leaking now, right? They're well past their warranty. So there's not many weeks that go by where I don't go by somebody redoing their work. And I see these guys, no safety gear. Thinking about the heat we have out here and looking at the way they're dressed, right? Not really properly made for not to get heat exhausted. When I see the lack of just, clean toilet, like you're looking like, man, these guys are just, I wonder how much you get paid to be in this really bad environment. And I do know it's not much. And I think, lean should be for everybody. It shouldn't just be for these big projects. So for us, we realize that, with this neuroscience is, for us to be good, we really have to be in this zone because these are the stats right here. And these stats aren't just stats that are on the paper. I'm going to read through them, but then I'm going to give you my story as well. But if you look, 63% of construction workers suffered from anxiety, depression in 2025. Construction workers report 2 times the national average of substance abuse. 60% experienced regular burnout in 2025. 80% are at risk, and 90% report work stress. If you look at the field worker, 11%, have suffered some type of PTSD symptoms. You're like, what does that mean? How, that's a word you hear like in war or something like that. And the problem is if you haven't been on a job site, it's hard to explain, but I've been on jobs where we've had full crews ready to go hand to hand fighting, right? Like looking like the West Side Story. It's like, what is happening here, right? I'm ready to start singing a song because here the Sharks and the Jets are about to start fighting each other. And I've actually seen other fit fights that have happened. I've seen workers that are so burnt out and just ready to give up. And you're like, what is happening? But these experiences they have are real. And I've actually been the one that caused those experience. And in my not so moment being the zone, I've been on those jobs where I've been nose to nose yelling at guys, right? I remember one time I was in an elevator working on a huge project, and the elevator's full of my team, right? So I had my Sharks crew with me. I had my laborers, my supers, and we had one foreman who would not work OT, and the client was paying us OT. This client was paying us $80,000 a week in OT average to get this project accelerated, and this plumber would not do it. And I remember one day just sitting there in the elevator when he's saying no for like the 6th week in a row and just going off on this guy, saying things that shouldn't be said, right? Just to another fellow human being. And just so mad that he wouldn't be on board with this team. And later find out the reason why is because he didn't get to see his kids a lot because he lived far away and he just wanted to be with his son on weekends. And I'm thinking, man, what kind of person was I? Like, what was his experience in construction like? And so when we look at these stats, they're real, right? Especially when you get to the last one that depending on what stat you look, construction is if it's baked in some stats we're number one, other stats number two, but leading for suicide per capita, right? Even more than police and military, who's gotten a lot of help over the years. But that's not the way construction should be. And it actually gets worse as you get on smaller projects with less support. You get that burnout kind of Scott story he gives you, right? You get my real story. I came into construction pretty healthy, and after 60 pounds of weight gain and type 2 diabetes and high blood pressures, I'm coming out of that now. And I say, since I've been at CoBuild, my blood pressure has been normal, which is kind of rare. Like, how can a company help cause that? Well, it's a philosophy we have. It's a philosophy to care about people and help people get to the place they need to be. So when we're talking about these things, like how does construction, especially small projects, TI and lean lead to this? It's because we create these environments where people can live in a healthy manner, even though we live in a pretty hectic type of construction. I have guys that are, most leaders will tell you a PM shouldn't run more than 2 to 3 projects. After that, they become useless. Well, in TIs, we don't get that option sometimes because the budget's from the VCs and that kind of stuff. But we found you actually can do it if you put systems in place to protect health, to protect people, and use lean to create this flow that actually works. So that's kind of why we're so passionate about these stats and ways to, kind of overcome them.
Okay, so let's get to the science. So we, in our learning objectives, we threw some names at you, Stephen Porges and Dan Siegel. They've done a bunch of work on this, and actually Dan Siegel in particular was looking primarily at kids who had experienced PTSD and significant trauma. And then they did a lot of research on some of this research comes from people who've endured war. So we're learning from these situations where trauma is real and really happening and applying it to construction and finding, unfortunately, the fit is too good. So the science basically says we have different nervous system regulation states. Ideally, in the zone, we are in homeostasis. That's when we experience the most well-being in life. It's some people call it rest and digest. It's the time you can sit back and share a meal with your friends. It's also the time that you can stay most curious, and there's most blood flow to the prefrontal cortex of the brain where good decision making is happening. The goal is to spend the most amount of time in our lives, both at work and away from work, in the zone. But that's just not reality. Things are stressful. Life happens. There is VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and that pushes us into the storm. The storm is sometimes referred as to a fight-flight state. It's basically activation of the nervous system, a flooding of different neurochemicals that push people into a place where they can start having agency to either get away or fight, right? And that's not the worst. It's just a short-term intervention for a short-term problem. Unfortunately, in construction, what sometimes happens is people get stuck in the storm, and that becomes their new normal, and their body re-regulates and recalibrates for life in the storm. And that's not a good baseline for anyone. In fact, as we talk about that, what happens is after I'm going to introduce this last section. So the storm is fight flight. Unfortunately, if you stay in fight or flight too long, your body begins to understand that it's never leaving fight or flight, and it begins to give up. And the neurochemicals change from adrenaline and epinephrine, things like that, to endogenous opioids, which flood the body and kind of numb a person out. They can be really disassociated. And you've probably seen this on a job site where someone's there physically, but they are not there mentally or fully there. And this actually feels a little bit better than the storm, but what we know is that is the body essentially preparing to die. So when we see folks on a job site who are checked out like that, what we know is they're close to, if not in, burnout. Now, when I first introduced this model to James, he had some questions. So what was your question, James, when you looked at this?
Well, so coming from that world, like I knew very well that I had lived in the storm, maybe even bordered on the swamp, and didn't even know it. So identifying it was important. And then when I was first introduced to this, I thought, oh, perfect. Like everybody at CoBuild works exactly in the zone. So there's no stress, completely stress-free. So that was kind of my question, was just kind of what you're showing here is truly to grow that zone, you have to be moving in and out of the storm. You've got to have good stress that was in there. I had that question, like, how did you guys do it stress-free?
Yeah, I didn't do it stress-free. That's not a thing. It's certainly not a thing in commercial construction. In fact, it's not ideal. It is kind of like a good workout. We grow our capacity and grow our zone by pushing the limits, and learning that we can actually go past the limit and then return to it quickly. Those skills are the things that build confidence in people, that they can handle problems, and actually their zone grows over time. So the goal is not to make a life of ease. It's actually to teach people that they can endure challenge and overcome it. And by doing that, they grow their zone. Okay, this is what I was talking about though. This is the bummer that we see way too often, is that people are in this zone, in and out, and that's ideal. We're growing when we're there, but very often in construction, I'm sure if I just did a little survey right now, especially if you've been in the field at all, there have been long seasons where people have been in the storm, right? But we don't want that to become the new homeostasis, the new baseline, because that'll draw us into burnout. The thing to know about burnout is it's really, really common in construction. And when we see it, we know that people don't return from burnout on their own. They actually don't have the resources to do it. And at that point, there needs to be others around them and systems in place to bring them back to a place where they have access to the zone in their nervous system. So that's just really important to remember as a person who's interfacing with folks who are probably at burnout, or a person who maybe has been in the place of disassociated checkout, is that you probably need to go get help if you've been stuck there.
Well, thanks, Steph. And I think one thing that you might be asking yourself, like, why are we talking about these two, what would apparently be two separate items, but it's not. When we looked at lean construction practices, and this is really important, order plus clarity plus respect. That's when you look at that, that's people working in the zone. Those are lean construction practices. But the other thing we found are when people are working in the zone, they provide order, they provide clarity, and they provide respect, which leads to lean construction practices. These are 100% connected to executing lean work at a high level and to do it in all of those ways. So they're absolutely intertwined with each other.
So it's basically a feedback loop. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Those are great words. I would have added those in there.
Yeah, I mean, so kind of bringing it all the way back to the beginning, my story. I wish that I could say this is a magic bullet, that if you build grit and resilience and you do lean practices, you're going to keep people from burning out. Um, and you just set those two things and you walk away and the system's there. It's not. It's a system that has to be constantly monitored. It has to be constantly upkept. As we all know, if you're doing like some of this hard work, compare it to a commercial construction project where you can't just send the schedule to the trade partners and expect that the job is going to build itself, right? It takes constant monitoring, constant attention, making sure that all plates are spinning at the same time. And so it's just important that, you have to do all of that. You have to maintain the system. And so kind of circling back and recapping kind of where we started to where we're at. There's the acknowledging the reality, which is this industry is stressful. It's a lot of hard work, and our people need help to do and implement lean. So we have to embrace the lean philosophy, which, a lot of people think it's just big restrooms that are fancy and nice on a job site. Lean is so much more than that. It really is a philosophy for people in Japan. It is the way that they live their lives every day. So for us to implement lean well, we actually have to make sure that we're embracing the philosophy of lean, not just the practices. And then once we do that, we can actually adapt the lean methods. I think one of the things we say around here pretty frequently, around a lot of different things, is that the meeting is to serve us, not us to serve the meeting, or the process is to serve people. We don't serve the process, right? So same thing for lean. We don't serve lean. Lean serves us. And so you have to be willing to adapt the lean methods so that they work for your team. And then a big piece of that is rejecting the toughness culture that has been built into the construction industry. As Steph said, being tough is not necessarily a bad thing, but what we found is people who are just tough, they're so tough that when they break, they shatter. And so we have to be able to reject that toughness culture and then use the neuroscience to build grit and resilience. There's a lot of science that actually goes behind this. Stephanie comes off as very unassuming, I think, in this presentation, but actually she's phenomenally brilliant and knows the science behind this stuff. And there's a lot of legit science behind how people's brains work and how they actually show up at work when you actually start to talk about staying in the zone. And then lastly, delivering lean in small projects, like going down this path. This is how you get there to that place where, as a team, this is what we found. This is how we got to delivering lean and doing it well on all of our projects, both small and big to this point. So.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Scott. That was a fantastic wrap up. I mean, it really nails what our purpose was here. We definitely have provided some time for any type of questions. We'd really invite everybody to unmute, turn their cameras back on. We'd love to see some faces. And if you have any questions in regards to this presentation, we really appreciate sharing our heart. Like, this is truly how we build. And there are not many general contractors that are doing this in this industry. I don't know of any other one. And that's why I, again, left that $1 billion company to come here, because this is the neuroscience. This is the way. Isn't that? I don't know. There's some Star Wars thing. This is the way that construction is going. And we want to ride that wave to make sure that we're bringing in successful projects on time, under budget, with people who survive it. So we'd absolutely open it up for any questions.
You can throw them in the chat too. Actually, I've got that open if that's more comfortable for you.
Perfect.
Guys, I got a question for you. This is Josh Gray. Sorry, I wasn't able to get the meeting started in the beginning, but Walter stepped in for me while my accounts were on the fritz. But I just wanted to ask if there was like a specific example of something in lean that just didn't fit into small projects that you were able to say, look, we just passed this by and didn't incorporate it, or we used a light version of it, like you mentioned, pull planning. So is there anything that you eliminated and then maybe something that you guys would have modified to fit smaller projects?
Yeah, I'll give two examples of that. So one was daily huddles. So I am a huge daily huddle fan. Like I think it's, when we look at our big picture form of project that we can, we use three forms of communication every week, right? And this is like embedded into our team: daily huddles, weekly trade partner meeting, and then every Friday every team sends a schedule update to the construction team and then to the trade partner team, right? So we're very big on communication. That doesn't work though when you're doing some of these smaller projects when you have a super running four of them, because what we found is a lot of times the people on the job site aren't the decision makers. So even if you have a huddle, they can't really add the input, or they couldn't even say, I'm like, hey, is your lighting package going to be here in 3 weeks to make sure that we can close the ceiling up? They wouldn't even have the answer, right? So on those, we had to communicate a lot with our Friday emails and our weekly trade partner meeting. So that was one. Even though we're huge fans of that, we had to adapt that and understand that that was just the reality of it. Also, the pool plan. So we do modified versions depending on the job. On some of these projects, it's a 16-week job. Most people in lean will tell you 16 week, 13 to 16 weeks is the max you want to pull, right? If you're doing a milestone schedule, you have a year project, you're doing milestones, you're pulling from that milestone. So for us, the whole job in a sense is almost a milestone. So on those, we definitely do a modified version of the pool plan where it's more of an input from the trade partners on durations than putting those schedules together. We'll still have it on site, and you'll still see stickies and stuff on the board. But instead of, if I'm just pulling to say Ruffin, I mean that could be 6 weeks, right? Like you're not going to pull 6 weeks then do it again. So our pool plans sometimes have to pull the full job or be more of a, to example of this is our supers will call the trades, get durations. They'll put together a waterfall schedule. They'll then meet the trades on site with that waterfall schedule, go through it and almost do more of an agreement meetings, just like a, not necessarily a pool. And then from there, go to the 4 week look aheads and run it off the look aheads become a lot more heavier, right? Like a percent complete plan with that look aheads become a heavier thing than necessarily a normalized milestone pools at everyone. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of modifications. That's why Scott said it perfectly is uh, we don't serve lean, lean serves us. So we're looking at it from more of a philosophical view of like, what are the things lean's doing? And so I might get yelled at if I'm at LCI saying these things, which we do go to LCI. James is presenting this year at LCI. They might not like these, but we know that lean for us is like the philosophical side, and we have to adapt this to our projects.
Yeah.
Hopefully
I would
does that
say
answer the
also,
question?
Go ahead, Stephanie.
yeah, I was going to say, one of the examples we gave, we did do a version of tact planning. A lot of our jobs tact doesn't really work for, frankly, because of the nature and the scope of the project. So we'll do polls and, but maybe not a lot of tact.
So you guys are approaching lean construction more from what Jordan was saying, a philosophical standpoint. You're not saying, okay, here's the practices for lean, we're going to apply them to our jobs. You're more like, what's the intent, and then how can we fit that intent into our smaller project?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to
yeah.
jump.
And
Can I jump in there? Because I want to add to what you were saying there, Jordan, and also to your question, Joshua, was, are there things that we're not doing? So this is really important. So you guys are in the Carolinas. Any of you familiar with Adam Hoots? He's a friend of mine that lives in the Carolinas. He's working on his doctoral thesis at Clemson right now on why lean implementation fails on, or why lean fails on first implementation, and a bunch of other fancy words. You know how they do those theses. But a lot of it is what we're telling you, or how we're approaching this, especially from a philosophical standpoint, is we're implementing it in batches, in increments. And that's really one of the important things. Like one of the reasons that he's identified is like the whole organization goes in, we're doing lean, right? And they start telling people instead of having buy-in. I mean, it's a process to get people to get there. And we're doing the same thing with our trade partners because they don't even, haven't even heard the word, and what do they get from it? And so that's our challenge, is we're slowly implementing things. And as we've done, kind of, we shared in both of those case studies, when we went to a bigger project, we put more in. Now, we didn't quite have a big room IPD. We would love to do that, but we're not at that point yet with our projects that they can commit that many resources, and it's a different, contracting vehicle. So with all of those, it's really about implementing what's right. And that's why we're always driven by the philosophy. And that's one thing that we talk about a lot in our company is, it starts with respect for people. There's a lot that goes along with that. Continuous improvement. We're always looking to, find the next thing that's going to make us better at it. So as we work through those processes, it's more about implementation than eliminating anything.
Appreciate the insight.
And you're the real Joshua Gray, right? Because I have a couple of them there.
Yes, I'm the real Slim Shady over here. Yeah, so that the account that we were hosting the webinar through is our CMAA account, and I was the one that signed up for it, so my name sits on that also. But for some reason, IT decided that today would be a great day to redo my Microsoft 365 permissions.
Oh, yeah.
So although I'm on this meeting on my phone, I was not able to join from my computer, which has the exact same Teams account, but it's shot right now. And for the last 2 hours, IT's been remoting into my desktop to try and fix it. Still hasn't been fixed. So we'll
Good
see how
times,
the
good
rest of the
times.
day goes. So, but appreciate you guys. This was a great presentation.
But I know we're running out of time. So did you want to talk about it, Steph?
Sure.
QR
I
code?
mean, yeah. So this is a QR code to a survey. It takes about 7 minutes, but it just is a burnout risk factors assessment. So if you want to take it, it goes through, gives you, cranks out a number, gives you some suggestions on maybe next steps, just to evaluate your own risk. And I mean, we don't collect any data on this, which means we can't print you a report and email it to you. So it's totally anonymous, but if you save the QR code, take a picture of it, other people can use the assessment too. And James, if you go back a slide, it does have our contact information, and people should feel free to reach out to us if they
Yeah, feel
have
free if you have questions
questions.
afterwards, or yeah.
Yep. We love to talk about this. And we're also gauging who gets called the most. So please, somebody call me. I think we gave you all the slides too. I don't know if you're going to be sharing that with the team. And then kind of the final wrap up to make sure everybody gets there. Whoever in this organization is checking the boxes, we have completed all of them. And we are providing you with your final continuing education credits. You all know what to do. Now I'm showing it to you on where you need to head. So we really appreciate being able to share this with your team and being invited to come speak with y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, great job.
Camera's not working, but yeah, I really appreciate it, guys. This was awesome. I really appreciate it, and hope to speak with you guys soon that I know, and we're members of the Old Dogs too. So I appreciate you guys kind of coming over here, taking your time, and yeah, appreciate it all. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, thanks everyone. Appreciate
Appreciate
it.
it.